All right, ahead of the eight ball live. Anthony, thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of follow up on what we just touched on interviews. So I actually wanted to ask you because I know you used to do you pretty much did software engineering your entire career, but when you do interviews, what's like your game plan? Like, would do you have like a framework or like a game plan of how you usually prepare for your coding interviews?
Yeah, so it's a little interesting, but I've prepared in like two different points in my life. So I would say there's like interviewing when you're in college, and then there's interviewing when you're a professional. So I've done both. So it's very similar to the way you prepare, and it's kind of you kind of hear about it. There are books about it, and there are definitely a lot of blog posts, and kind of there's always like this unwritten just rumor mill of like how you do it. So basically, I would say the overall strategy when you're software engineering is you do a lot of leak code and HackerRank, which are basically like online problems, like brain twisters that involve a lot of like programming and just like you do these very like short, they're not like long projects, but they're more like these problems that are only supposed to take you an hour or so to do. So I would say like a lot of your interviewing is just doing a bunch of those and then reviewing books like Cracking the Coding Interview, which is basically like a condensed version of what you learn in maybe your first two like computer science courses.
Now, did you read How to Crack the Coding Interview?
Yeah, I skimmed it. I would say luckily a lot of that was still fresh on my mind because I was only like a year or so removed from college when I started looking for another job. But it was definitely, I would say I used it a lot more in college where there were some things that when I started interviewing for jobs, I was like a year or so removed from the classes. And I was like, at the time when I took those classes, I didn't know how important that information was going to be, like learning algorithms, learning all about data structures, runtime, big O notation. Like at the time, I didn't realize how important that was going to be later on. I didn't really know when I took those classes what interviewing was going to be like or what it was going to be like to look for a job. I thought it was going to be a lot more behavioral interviews or companies would be like, oh, is this person like a good fit? Like, do we want to have them for the summer? I wasn't, when I took those classes, I wasn't really that prepared for like, oh, like basically everything I'm learning in this class is going to be all the stuff I do for the interviews. So I definitely spent a lot more time when I was younger reading the book. And I think a lot of that information just kind of carried over to now where every now and then I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember how to solve this.
Isn't it crazy that what you do in the coding interviews has literally nothing to do with like the actual work you do?
Yeah, that's like one of my biggest complaints. I always feel bad, like at Goldman when I would do interviews or I would listen in, I would just like we'd look at this person's resume, they're stacked, and like we'd ask some feelers or we'll talk about something in the JavaScript world or something about a library we don't like, and then as soon as we get to like the, the like coding part of it, it's just so irrelevant that we lose a lot of good people. Or like I usually notice I'm like, oh, this person like they didn't read Cracking the Coding Interview or they haven't been doing these problems, so
It's cut.
they're not familiar with like how you approach it, how you talk about it, like how you communicate with us, like when you ask for help, what kind of help we can give you. Like that's always a big bummer because it isn't like it's nowhere near the type of collaboration or just environment or the type of things you actually do like on a like at your job on a day-to-day basis. So it's just so weird. And it's like if you don't prepare, if you don't practice, if you don't study up, you're gonna have a difficult time nailing those interviews or like making a good impression on like the rubric we have that we look at while we're interviewing you.
I know. And the thing about it is like I guess like the best way would you say it's pretty much just like an IQ test you have to prepare like 2 or 3 months in advance?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an IQ test. I would just it's more so like how well you study and how well you practice that you see a lot of different problems that you sort of start building like, oh, like, if I see this problem, like I got to think, oh, it has to do with a map or it's a sorting problem. Oh, it's a problem that's asking me to do dynamic programming. So I have to like cache a lot of the searching I'm doing. You just kind of do a lot of the problems in those 2 to 3 months that you start to categorize problems as soon as you read it or as soon as like we ask you something that's maybe a follow-up, like you ask us a question, it's like what are we optimizing for or what are some of the edge cases, we'll tell you some of that and then you'll be like, oh yeah, this reminds me of this problem, and that sort of gives you a good like position of where to start. So like if you haven't been studying, like I can give you all these tips, I can give you all these follow-up like questions to like I can give you follow-up answers to your questions, but like if you haven't been studying, it's not going to be that helpful or beneficial to you.
In your opinion, what do you think is the hardest type of problems? Like dynamic programming, would you say?
For me, it's definitely graph or tree problems. I don't
Really?
know. Those can be, yeah, those, especially if they put them in word problems, those aren't always the most, they're not always the most clear. Like you'll kind of read it and you'll be like, oh, like this is like I could do this using a for loop or something, or like I'll do some. So there's so many different ways they can word those problems that you'll start going in an entirely different direction, and then you'll realize at one point you're like, oh, like you'll start with nodes and you'll start like creating like arrows and stuff, and then you're like, oh wait, this is a graph problem. Like, oh, I just wasted so much time trying to figure that out.
Thought I
Those
had.
problems would be the hardest, and just for me, I remember even in school I had problem with like grasping the basic like abstract subject of it.
But you usually really don't get those questions unless you're like interviewing unless like Amazon or like some like top tech companies, right? Like a bank would never ask you that, right? Usually.
No, they tend. I would say that definitely big tech companies like it's a lot harder to interview, and like the questions are a lot more vigorous, and they tend to test this. But sometimes it really depends on your interviewer. Like the way it works is we have like a list of questions that we're allowed to ask you, and maybe some people always stick with the top three, but you'll probably have maybe a senior engineer or like some very distinguished engineer who's like, oh, you know what, I haven't done a graph problem in a while, like it'd be kind of fun to see if this person knows what they're doing, and then like I'd also be able to brush up on it a little bit, because for some engineers it's like also like it's like an exercise for us as well. Like the interviews are supposed to be collaborative, or like that's the way they're supposed to be. And sometimes people don't take them that way. But a lot of times the interview is like, how well do you work? Like how well are you at like problem solving? How well are you of figuring out obscurities and just kind of clearing things up so we can find a solution? That is, it tends to. I think some of the better interviews tend to be where I'm feeding off their energy and they're feeding off mine. They're asking me questions. I'm either telling them, I'm either clearing up the problem they're having, or I'm like giving them like other alternatives to think about with my questions.
Is there ever a scenario, because you said it is an exercise, is there ever a scenario where the interviewer doesn't really know the answer to?
Um, yes, I would say that like a lot of times HR, the people in charge of the interviews, tell you to prepare, or, like pick some of these questions, like have them ready, and like look it over. But every now and then, like like a lot of us still have day jobs. Like I never know when like something could break and burn, and then I have to like maybe I normally do like half an hour before the interview. I look over the question, make sure I understand the answer, make sure I have some like follow-up questions already in mind. But like if I'm really busy that day and I can't do that half hour preparation, I may come in a little more not as helpful, a little more like, oh, like what was the answer again, like, or like what is the answer to like the my follow-up questions. So I don't know, it varies, but they tend to recommend that you be like prepared for whatever when it comes to these interviews, and that it works a lot better if you know the answer going in, and what kind of solutions are accepted.
That'd be so awkward if you were the interviewer and didn't know what the answer was during an
Right.
interview. That'd be
Yeah.
tough. But I wanted to ask you, so I'm just curious, how would you say the experience as a software engineer as an intern differs from a full-time position?
I would say when I was an intern, there were like, so the company I work at now is different from the company I interned at, and so I have a feeling the internships vary by company and sort of the expectations are. But I will preface it with I left the company I interned at. Like I went back there full time and I stayed less than 2 years before I switched companies. But basically, my whole feeling was that when I was an intern, the company went above and beyond, having events, having networking events, like just kind of exposing us to a side of the firm that you never actually get exposed to again when you go full time. So I think my internship was a lot more fun, and it felt a lot more professional, and I feel like it was a lot more intellectually stimulating, and there was just a lot of things going on that I was like, oh, I like how many people I can meet, like I like how flexible my work is, I like how flexible my managers are, that I was sort of given a different perspective on how a job would be, like how working 9 to 5 would be at like a company. So then when I came full time, there's less events, less networking, and you're more like you're supposed to get your stuff done. Like if you get your stuff done, then maybe there's networking stuff, maybe there's other events, but it's always like you're kind of expected to be at your desk for like the whole 10 hours you're in the office, and like you're expected to produce. So I would say that was like the weird realization. But like now being at a different company, I know that's not always the case. It's very dependent on your organization, the culture that your managers have for you. But I will say that a lot of companies tend to go above and beyond for interns, and like it's hard to get good talent when you're like an engineering company because there's so many like top engineering companies, like they're giving you amazing pay that like you can't really differentiate the companies based on pay a lot of times. So it's like, what other things can they give you? Can they like stimulate you intellectually? Can they give you like cool stuff like a game room? Can they give you free food? Can they give you like managers who are like distinguished outside the company? Like at Google, we have like the creator of like GitHub works there, and that's like one of the biggest draws. Is like, you know, your manager could be this like person who created some technology you use, or that technology that's so popular. So there's a lot of different things that companies use to kind of pitch you the perks of working at that company when you're an intern. So I definitely feel you feel like a lot more valued, and you're like, ooh, like I get to pick and choose like when you're an intern.
That's so interesting you say that, and I think one of the interesting things about especially software engineers is that the work-life balance is like so much better relative to other jobs, and the pay. I think I think like maybe a couple of years ago, the average salary for a software engineer was exactly 100K, which is pretty crazy to think that the hours aren't that bad. I mean, sometimes I hear some companies let some of their workers get out sometimes four when they don't have that much to do like during a certain point of time, which is pretty interesting. It's a good life balance.
Yeah. I know like for me, like doing engineering at Goldman Sachs, which is like an investment bank, like my friends who were on the business side were working twice, 2.5 times what I was like. They'd come in on the weekends. They would
Software engineers?
no, investment bank.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so they'd be working the weekend. They'd be working like 9 to midnight or whatever the hours are, and I would be like, I would be they would like message me, and I'd be like, dude, I've been home for like 6 hours now.
I
Like,
believe it. There is I remember read an article a couple years ago about this Bank of America intern. She worked 3 days straight without sleep, and she passed away apparently. Something
yeah,
crazy like that. The hours for investment banking are absurd. But it
yeah,
happens.
I would say it's definitely a culture thing. I don't know. For my time working at an investment bank, I'm still not. I wasn't really convinced that it was like reasonable for people to be working those hours. I just feel like it was either up to poor management or just keeping up the toxic culture that makes investment banking like what it is. Kind of one of those things where like I went through it, now you have to go through it. I feel like it's a lot of that. But luckily, engineering is like nothing like that. It was like almost pretty similar like to what you'd find at any other tech company from like my experience.
I think for tech companies or tech in general, they do a nice job of kind of like reeling in talent. Like you notice, like if you try to look for some investment banking like pre-internship programs, you'll probably find like one. But you look it up for tech, there's like I think you did the early bird camp at Twitter. There's Capital One has a few, Goldman Sachs has a few. I think it's just a lot better. So I'm just curious as to how important do you think, especially if you don't have any experience in tech, if you want to be a software engineer, to have those like that experience?
I definitely think it's like important or like it's good to have. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's like a make it break. Like if you can't get that, I wouldn't stress about it. Like it's nothing. Like it's just what I noticed is that it tends to be a conversation starter between people when they're like, "Oh, what is that?" Like it's not really an internship, but what is that? And so I wouldn't say if you don't get it, like don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Like nothing, like it's not going to impact you anyway. But it is like a conversation starter, and it is like an extra bullet point on your resume that is somewhat relevant. But I definitely liked my time at Twitter, like the 2 weeks I was there, just because like growing up, I come from like a blue collar home, so I knew nothing about Silicon Valley. Like I knew nothing about engineering, like outside of like like 2 week projects and like just being in TA hours. Like I feel like I had a very non-diverse view on engineering. Like I was just like, oh, like what, like I work on something for 2 weeks, finish that, and then I work on something else. That being at Twitter, I just got a lot more perspective. I like got to see what the different roles are. I didn't know you could do like front end engineering, back end engineering, database management, site reliability. Like there are all these titles, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I also just didn't realize that the culture was so like different. Like like it's people making a decent amount of money and like working 9 to 5, but I was just so used to like wearing a suit and tie to the office, or like just having to wear some like business casual clothing, and like that's how you were supposed to be. And here I was going to this big tech company in San Francisco, and some dude is wearing like ripped skinny jeans, Yeezys, and like a whale t-shirt, and I was like, what the heck? And then
Ripster.
not to mention the free food. Like when I walked into the Twitter building, I got my like security badge, which I thought was like weird. I was like security badge, and then it's like as soon as I walked in, it's like a huge cafeteria with like all you can eat like buffet, just a spread. And it was just the craziest. Like I was like I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I mean, I heard the rumors and I heard these things, but it definitely felt like I was in like school or like I was in this like very prestigious like university and they were just whining dining me. And then it was just so weird that I was also like doing work as well and I was somewhat like productive. Like for some reason I found it in me that all the perks and benefits I was like, oh, that's all cool, but like I'm still here to work and stuff. I don't even know. It was like it was the coolest experience for sure and it opened up my eyes and it definitely kind of sold computer science a lot more to me where I was like, this could be my life after college. Like, this isn't that bad. Like, here I was thinking I'd have to wear like a suit and tie to work every day, work 9 to 9, and like, kind of be like, have a boring life and just be like, ah. So I don't know. It was a good eye opener, and I really liked the experience that gave me. And like I said, it also gave me a resume like point, which I thought was like an extra like brownie point for
Yeah,
that.
of course. So you're not a big suit and tie guy?
So it's funny because my parents are blue collars. Like they don't have careers. They have like regular jobs. My dad's been in the food business his whole life as like a chef and a manager, then like running his own like small businesses. But I don't know. They were like, we just want you to have a career where you can wear like a suit and tie to work, and it's like, you have that, and it's like you don't really have to worry about different seasons or finding different jobs. So my dad was always like, I want you to wear a suit and tie to work. And I originally was going to college to be an accountant. I was going to go to
Really?
business school and major in accounting, but the school I eventually went to college for didn't have a business school, so I guess it was a win-win. But yeah, I don't know. It was something I was fine with. And then when I became a computer scientist, a software engineer, and I was exposed to like Silicon Valley, I was like, yeah, like I didn't even want to wear a suit and tie. Like I would do that maybe to make money, but like now that I know I can make money and not have to do that, like that's way more chill and that's more my vibe.
What kind of food did your dad cook?
All different kinds. Like he started working in a kitchen when he was like 15 as like a dishwasher, moved his way up. He used to be in Mexican restaurants. He was in four-star Italian restaurants. And then he started owning like smaller like Italian restaurants in like different parts of Massachusetts. And then it was a little too stressful. And then with the economic downturn of like 2008, 2009, he kind of stepped away from all of it. And then now he just works at like kind of the head chef at one of the local university like dining commons.
There you go. But did you always know you wanted to be a software engineer, or did you just take a course and then you just got interested?
The first time I took a computer science course, I was in high school, and it was sort of a senior year blow off course. And I absolutely hated it. It was in Python. My teacher was like reading from a book. She didn't really know computer science, or she did a poor job of explaining what it was. And basically, the class was like us writing like a basic like chat box that you would hard code responses to like regular, like really simple like string regexes. I don't know. A lot of that information just flew by, and I had no idea what was going on. But it was like my senior year, and it was just like relatively chill class to take with like all the other AP classes and stuff I was taking. Then I went to college and I originally went as like economics and like math because we didn't have accounting and we didn't have finance, and the closest thing we had to finance was this double major of economics and math where you take some more financial theory courses. But basically it was sort of a one of our most, I would say, practical like course selections that would kind of get you a job in Wall Street or get you a job at like what you would consider like high paying jobs to be. So I initially started down that path, but after I took a few economics courses, I hated it. I was drawing all these supply demand curves. I was like, what does this have to do with trading stocks? Like, how do you make money from this stuff? And it was like, I don't know, it was a lot more of a academics economic focus. And I definitely had the feeling that a lot of the stuff we were learning was more for us to do research or just more research into the theory and just be kind of theorists about like economics. But then I luckily, like my friend group freshman year, a lot of them were engineers and they all graduated as engineers. But at my school, like at Brown University, in order to get your engineering requirement, you have to take at least one computer science class. And luckily for me, all my friends were engineers, so I was friends with them when they took that first computer science class. And like they were doing cool ass stuff, like they were building Pac-Man, Tetris, Doodle Jump, and I was just like, what? Like that's a class? Like you get to do that stuff? I mean, in hindsight, like I thought it was really easy or simple. I was like, oh, like guess you're just building all this stuff. Like I want to learn how to build that. Like I have no idea how you build that stuff. So for me, it was just that I could build something that I could play. That was like the big thing for me, where I was like, oh, like building games, like that sounds so cool. So I would say that was my introduction, was seeing my friends work on different projects that I was like, oh, you can also build games with computer science. Like I didn't know that. I thought all you did with computer science was like scripting and all this like other stuff that was unrelated to games. And then yeah, the next year I took my first computer science class, and then it's been history since then. I caught a bug, and then immediately after the first class, I switched my major to computer science.
Wow, it just took off. But
Yeah.
Anthony, you have a lot of interest because I I saw that you played some club lax at school. So you like
Yeah.
lax, huh?
Yeah.
You played in high school?
Yeah, I played it in high school. Was actually so my extracurriculars were actually sport. I was a big football guy. I played football all 3 years. I lettered a couple years, but then I got concussed my junior year of high school, and then I dropped football. But up until that point, I thought I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to like a D3, D2 school, and I'm gonna play football, and then I'm gonna get a like a scholarship to play sports, and that'll because I don't come from money. So one of the big things was like, how am I gonna pay for college? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until like I started getting into like Ivy League schools where I was like, oh, like damn, like me having good grades is actually going to pay me to get to college. Like I kind of knew I could get like an academic scholarship, but my grades weren't like I didn't have like 4.0 GPA, and I wasn't taking like 10 APs my time in high school. Like I was taking a couple, and I was definitely challenging myself, but I was definitely more of like a sports guy. Like one year I played football, basketball, and lacrosse. Like I was a 3 season like sport athlete, like just playing all these different sports. And so I was just kind of known to be just this like very athletic person. But I don't know, something else about me. I was always kind of nerdy, and I was just like challenging myself in school. That I didn't mind taking AP classes or honor classes. Like I actually found them really intellectually stimulating, and I like enjoyed like struggling a little bit through high school. Like that was a lot of fun, I think, and it definitely kept me like entertained and like I don't know, like it just like enough of my time was spent just doing all these different things that I was just like kind of content with how everything went. But yeah, I did a lot of sports. And then I did a lot of sports in high school, and then we had a club lacrosse team that was like easy to get on. Like no one really played lacrosse, or no one wanted to play club lacrosse. So it was like I was at like a activities fair at Brown, and they were like, "Do you want to play? Like, have you played before?" And I was like, "Are people on the team that haven't played before?" And so it was like half the team had played before, and then half the team had never picked up a lacrosse stick before. And we were like the club lacrosse team. We weren't that good, but it was like a lot of fun. And like the ones who had played like had like serious experience. Like a lot of us had been playing for like 5, 6 years, maybe even more since we were younger.
You ever play baseball at all or no?
My dad didn't want me to get into baseball. I don't really know
Really?
why. Yeah, he was just like, I don't think you'll like it. So I didn't, and then I picked up lacrosse. So that was in the spring in Massachusetts. So it interfered with baseball, so I never had the chance. But I always wish I would have tried it. That and soccer, I wish I would have tried them at least a year,
Name.
and just would have seen how I felt or how I liked them.
You know, the interesting about baseball is that it's one of those sports where if you've never played it and you go to a game, you think it's like golf. It's like the most like boring thing. But if you played it yourself, it's more like a culture thing because like if you haven't played it, you just see a guy throwing a ball and someone hitting it. But if you played baseball, you see like just a completely different perspective. Like you'll see a pitcher trying to paint the corners, hitting low, trying to hit the inside. Just a completely different perspective. I think that's the interesting about baseball, and I think that's why a lot of people really don't like watching it because they like don't understand like the little things.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think? Like if you had to do it over again, like what would you tell other people like or like what do you think people should focus on when they're on college? Like should it be like networking, like trying to get into clubs, like Greek life, or just like having a good time?
Yeah. So from my experience, what I wanted to do was I was like when I was doing it, I was like I need to figure out how I'm gonna get a job and what's gonna get me a job the fastest. So I was taking maybe classes. I was like, you know what, this seems kind of useful, or this seems like it would really stand out on my resume. Extracurriculars, definitely when I was like before I picked up computer science, I was definitely just trying all different clubs. Like I was a part of the investment club. Like I was part of our engineering club. I was doing sports, and I was like doing all these different things, just kind of trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Like, what am I going to do after college? And I think that was something I came in with because I was like, I was one first gen, so I didn't know shit. I just came in and I was like, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. Like, I didn't have anyone to ask any questions about. So I was just kind of navigating the space on my own, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what I wanted to do after. And like, because I was low income, I was like, I would prefer not to be low income after I'm giving these 4 years to just excel at like an elite university like Brown University. So I was just trying all these different things. And I think for some people, like, you know, Greek life is dope. And like, if you have, like, if you're able to join like a fraternity or sorority you like, and you're able to meet people you like, go for it. Like, that's definitely a way to expand your network and maybe get opportunities. But for me, I didn't see a lot of value in it. And I think the culture at Brown was low key kind of toxic. And I was just kind of like aware of that. And I was like, I don't really want to be associated with something that's like toxic. Like, I'd rather not be associated with that. And it was just something where I was like, oh, like, I'm not that big of a fan of it. And so, yeah, so I was just all over the place. And it wasn't until I was in computer science that I kind of figured out, I was like, oh, I have to take these classes and these classes. But the thing about computer science classes is they're like 2-3 times harder than any other classes. Like, I remember my economics class would maybe take me like 5-6 hours a week. Like, it was like I'd read and then I'd do a problem set and I'm done. With the computer science classes, you have to learn the language that class is in, which could be Java, could be Go, could be C++, could be C. Like, every semester you're expected to learn a new language for one of these classes. And then you have to figure out what the requirements are for your project. And then you start building it, and then almost immediately you're gonna start running into bugs. You're gonna be like, oh damn, I don't know like how caching works, or oh, I don't know how to set up like a server, or oh, like I'm keep getting seg faults. Like, what's going on in my code? That you like start to realize that you're gonna have to devote a lot more time to like your classes or your projects, especially the classes that are known to be like really time intensive and like require like a lot of work from you.
And that's a problem, right?
What?
I was saying that's a problem, right? Because if you're trying to, let's say you have a couple interviews lined up during the week, like with all that work, because it is true, computer science is a very, very time-consuming thing, especially the courses. So how did you set aside time to make sure you could prepare for your interviews? Or is that kind of like inherent in some of the work that you were doing anyways?
I mean, in an ideal world, some of the stuff you would be doing would be relevant to interviews, but to be honest, none of it was related in any way. Like, I had taken a database class, and I was just doing like very theoretical stuff. Like, it was problem sets, but it was like math equations on how the different SQL joins like are calculated, and sort of figuring out what the storage constraint and the memory constraint. I mean, sometimes every now and then you'll have an interview with a guy who all he does is databases. So maybe that'll be a good discussion to have, or maybe the guy will think of you in like, or the person, like maybe they will think about you in like a really good way. So yeah, but I know most times I had to like either lose a little bit of sleep, stay up a little later, get my like 2 or 3 hacker ranks for the night, or like my extra chapter cracking the coding interview. Like, yeah, it was tough. It was a struggle, but I don't know. Like, even now, I surprise myself. I have no idea how I did it. Looking back at it now, where I have a job and I can barely do anything after work because I'm so tired. Like, it was definitely like, once you're on a roll, it's not easy to pick something else up and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna take like a 20-30 minute break right now and like do a couple problems, or I'm gonna like try to write out this like the pseudocode for this algorithm from like straight memory and see if I have it memorized yet. So I don't know. There's just a bunch of different ways, and I never thought preparing for an interview was something you have to do for like 5 hours straight. For me, it was like, if you can get 15-20 minutes in at like a couple points in the day, perfect. Like, even if you don't have a computer, like oftentimes, like, well, I mean, now that everything's virtual and remote, I guess doing it on a computer is more beneficial. But when I was interviewing, everything was whiteboarding. Yeah. So like, it was even better if I could just grab like a pen and paper and I would just ask myself a question, maybe one I memorized, or maybe make one up that is like relatively easier, relatively like, oh, you know what, if I really thought about it, I could solve it. And basically just pen and paper, try to solve a problem, or maybe try to, like I said, rewrite an algorithm from scratch, or just maybe try to explain the data structure in words, what it does, or maybe list like all the different ways I can create and initialize a data structure in like Java. So I don't know, like you can definitely find ways to study without it having to be like a sit down like 2-hour session, just me like typing away, solving problems, and then looking at chapters for like 2 hours. Like, you could easily block it up and just do it at different points during the day, and that was something I did. But yeah, so with like the CS classes, it was really hard, really time intensive. It was difficult, so I didn't have time for a lot of other extracurriculars. And then when it came to interviewing or job search, like, it's hard, and I didn't get my first like job offer until I'd interviewed with like 40 companies like 3 months into my search. Like, I was almost done with like my first semester of junior year, and it wasn't until I got my first job offer where I was like, oh, thank God, like all I needed was one. But it took a lot of time. Like those 3 months was just me consistently studying, consistently practicing, just consistently stressing about not only school, getting my grades, make sure I was on track to graduate, but also like, damn, I have to find an internship. Like, I mean, you don't have to find it, but for me, I was like, you get paid like a decent amount of money, like more than I can get paid any other summer job. And then at the same time, I'd be getting something directly applicable to like what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I'd rather find out now if this is really like a path I see myself down, or if this is just something like I think I like because I don't know enough about it, or I haven't lived the day in the life of like an engineer yet to fully know if this is something I'm happy with. But yeah.
You were always wired then, so you always had like the mindset, like okay, like have like you were always thinking long term, pretty much.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking long term, and like Brown was just somewhere where like you're just surrounded by so many motivated, studious people. Like you're just surrounded by some of the smartest people like all over the world, not just the U.S. Like there's a decent amount of just international students who are like some of the brightest minds of whatever countries or locations they come from. But yeah, so I think I fed off a lot about that, and I also was just like, it's only 4 years. I wasn't like, I feel like when I was younger in high school, I definitely wanted to go to the party school and like, I wanted to have like the best 4 years of my life. But I quickly realized that at my time at Brown, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be getting that. Like this isn't. I chose the wrong school for something like that. So it's kind of easy for me to be like, okay, it's not going to be like, I'm not going to have a party life. Like I won't be like living that like quintessential like life you see in movies where everyone's like, I got to go to college and live that. So I was like, let me just do something that is going to be a longer term investment, but I know it'll pay off. And that was just sort of something. It's sort of something you feel when you're like I said, first gen, low income. Like a lot of my peers felt that way. That it's like, like we were given like one of the craziest opportunities to better ourselves and kind of move upwards in our lives. That's sort of the stuff our parents dreamed about and like the stuff our parents like worked so hard for. So in a way, I kind of also did it for my parents. Where I was like, my parents sacrificed so much for me that I could take these 4 years to just kind of joke around, be independent, party, like kind of live this life I always wanted to, living inside like my parents' home. But I don't know. Then another part of me was just like, oh yeah, but like I don't think that'll lead to like long term like happiness, or I know after the 4 years I'll regret having done that. So let me do something entirely different that I'm not entirely sure how it's gonna go. And yeah, I was like, I'm pretty content with that decision. I'd say there was definitely a lot of times I like thought about it and was like, is this really what I want to do? Like, I'm like wasting these 4 years of my life in like the library, just studying, doing all these hard classes and stuff. But like I said, it was just a studious environment where it wasn't, I'd feel that way 1 second and then I'd see someone like having a mental breakdown in the library next to me because they're like pre-med and they like need that 4.0. And I was like, you know what? I can do that. Like if this person's here just crying, studying, grinding, like I can do that. Like I don't know. It was just the environment. I was just very motivated. I was like, damn, these people are going through it and they're still here grinding.
You ever pull an all-nighter at the library?
I did not. I did not. I was someone who like I valued my sleep, so I would just like I ditch missing friends. I'd eat my dinner and like my lunch in the library if I had to, but I tried not to. I think maybe the least amount I ever slept in college was maybe 4 or 5 hours, but it was like a Friday or Saturday night when I was like out like de-stressing, like hanging out. Like it was never because of schoolwork.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are people who like grab their blankets and pillows and like sleep on top of the desk at libraries.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I don't know how you do that.
No, I was someone who like, I could just tell that if I did it for too long, I was just not going to be productive and I was just going to be stressing myself out. So I just kind of knew when to call it a night. Like if it would have got to a point where I was just getting overwhelmed or I was just like, you know what, I'm not getting anything done. Let me just call it a night and try again in the morning.
Yeah, it honestly really doesn't make sense to pull an all-nighter. Like, it makes sense because you have extra hours, but, like, you're dead. Like, you're pretty much half awake.
Yeah, like, the way I always looked at it is like, yeah, you're using that time now, but you're taking away from some other point, either later this day or, like, later some point you're going to have to sleep and crash, like.
Were a lot of them the international students pulling all-nighters? Because at least how it was at my school.
I would say it's hard to really tell who was doing it, but everyone was doing it. There wasn't like a demographic, but I would say if anyone, it was like pre-med students, like students who had to like get the 4.0s on like everything because like, they had aspirations for med school and that's tough. Or the people doing like biomedical engineering, just like those hard majors that like just require infinite amount of lab time and an infinite amount of time of you just reading your textbook and doing all this obscure ass stuff. Like, I don't know. Those kids definitely had it the hardest, and we're just always there.
at Brown, were there the international kids who like drive around and like they're like Ferraris or like Porsches?
Yeah, I definitely saw a Maserati and like a Bentley and like Range Rovers. I definitely saw a lot of those. But because Providence is just so small and like everything is a one-way street, like you never really saw too many of them. Every now and then you'd see some, and like I mean, everyone was aware that there were a lot of really rich people at the school. But I mean, you would definitely see the wealth a lot more in like the Canada Goose, like $1,000 like
Canada
jack
Goose.
stuff. I mean,
You
there
ever,
just wasn't what?
did you ever have a Canada Goose? Did you ever buy
No,
one? Yeah.
no. I mean, I could
Never
buy
like
one now, but like it just goes against everything that I was in like college. So it's like I don't want to be that person. Like in my head, I was like, I hated the Canada Goose. Like,
I would never like on a suit, yes. On a Canada, like you can buy like a Calvin Klein jack on eBay for like $50. It looks exactly the same. Like that never made any sense to me. Suit, yes,
right.
but Canada Goose, like that's like hold on a second, you're like pushing way too far here. But I have a question. Can we agree that dyeing hair is such a pandemic thing? Like everywhere I look, who I've known, everyone's pretty much dyed their hair. I think from when I made, I think you dyed your hair actually.
When we met the first
Yeah.
time, oh, that must have been a
Oh,
while ago. Yeah, I definitely I dyed it after I had graduated from Brown, like
so
the
okay.
2 weeks. And then maybe if you had met me when I had first been starting off, I probably still had the frosted tips because I didn't shave my head. Like I just kind of let it grow out. But yeah, I recently dyed my hair again, and it's definitely a pandemic thing. I was definitely getting bored of just seeing myself in the mirror, just kind of look the same for like 6 months. I was like the only other person. Like I had a couple friends I was seeing during the pandemic, but like I was the only other person. I was like, you know what? Let me change it up. Let me change this look. And so I did it, and I also just saw a bunch of Reddit threads and YouTube videos on how to dye your hair, and I was like, how hard could it be? Like I've done it before, but I had help from friends that I was like, let me do it myself. Let me see what kind of results I get.
Yeah, I had a friend do it for me, but I had just gotten a haircut, and apparently when you dye your hair after you get a haircut, it stings. It's like
Yeah,
it's like you ever use peroxide, like when you get a cut or whatever. It's that kind
yeah,
of fizzy kind of like feel of burns.
yeah,
It's not a really pleasant thing. But I wanted to ask you because I know that you taught English. I think what was it during high school you did it?
yeah.
Yeah, do you want to touch on that a little bit? Maybe why you did it and what you took away from that?
Yeah. So my parents were really big into like religion. They're like Roman Catholic, and they're really into it. And basically, the parish for the church was like, "Hey, we're teaching some of the parents like some English so they can feel more involved in the community." So much the parish leaders or the people who host like the Catholic church classes like asked me like, "Hey, do you want to be one of our instructors?" And basically, it was like a few of us, and we were just setting up basic English lessons, teaching them like basic phrases, like basic how to order food, how to say like, yes, I want more. Basically breaking down maybe viral like YouTube videos, songs and stuff. Like I don't know, like we were just trying to give them a kind of more of a grasp of like English and maybe the non-traditional ways of like teaching it, like more in like a cultural norm way for people to feel more immersed or just have a better understanding as to like the cultural norms of being in America, speaking English, and sort of the culture around us, so we wouldn't be as secluded. Because a lot of the people at the church my parents went to, like my parents, they're immigrants. Like a lot of the community that goes to that church, all immigrants. So a lot of them, most of them had been here for a few years, but they're like every now and then there's a new family arriving, there's a new family moving over, and our church just thought it'd be something nice to do for them. But yeah, I did that, and that was like pretty cool. This was like 2010, 2009, like a while ago. But honestly, I was like, why not? I kind of want to help people learn English. I think it's really valuable for people to learn English, and I've always had a soft spot for like immigrant communities or just like immigrant families, and I'm always like, okay, what can I do to help, or like what can I do to make these people feel welcomed and more inclusive, and how can I make them feel less strangers in the environment they're in? So that's what I did. I mean, I didn't do anything crazy. Like all we did was like I said, like we just taught them basic phrases. We kind of have to teach them because like a lot of them were a lot older, so it's like a lot harder for them to learn new languages. That we teach them something one week, and then the next week they'd like forget it entirely, or they'd be messing up on the way they said it. So a lot of times we just kind of be repeating the same classes like every 2 weeks, and just kind of maybe trying to jazz it up a little bit.
What kind of songs were you breaking down? Songs by Drake?
I think at one point we kind of trolled around and we did Gangnam Style, and we were
Oh,
like these.
Gangnam Style.
Yeah, and we were kind of
Uh,
like we were like this isn't really English, but people think it sounds like this, and we were kind of like trying to be funny and just like I don't know, we were like most of us were teenagers, and we were just kind of like, oh, how can we make this fun? And the parents enjoyed it. I mean, a lot of them were like, oh, you guys are so immature and whatever, but we were like, I don't know, it was kind of one of those things. It's like, how do you understand popular culture when you're not from this culture? Like when you kind of don't understand how these things are or why these things are funny.
that song's
I mean, it was
right?
what?
That song's Korean, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Korean. I
Korean.
think he says something, and I don't even think it's English. It's just like it sounds English, and like everyone is just like, oh, he's saying open condom style, and basically that's like our lesson was like that. It's like we were like, it's not English. It sounds like this, and we'd be like, this is this, and then we kind of tell them what it is, and some of them would laugh and giggle and stuff. But I think that was one of the more memorable lessons I remember giving. But it was just a lot of stuff like that. Maybe we did Drake songs, maybe we did Taylor Swift or whoever was popular at that time. We definitely would pick up just I don't know, we'd Google stuff and we'd be like, okay, what are like top phrases for ordering food, or like what are the top 10 dishes in like America for food? Like what do people like to eat? And we just kind of teach them what those words are and just basic stuff like that.
Now you did a lot of that stuff, like kind of like I guess lead was quote unquote leadership experience because you did you were a student well, what'd you do at Brown, this diversity leadership role you had there?
Yeah, so I mean, luckily for when I was in college, school started like I definitely noticed it like more my upperclassmen year, like junior senior years, that a lot of universities were making more of an effort into diversity and inclusion and realizing, oh, we don't have that many people of color in our staff, like we don't have that many women on our staffs, and so a lot of the departments at Brown were like, you know what, we need to create our own little like committee of students who can kind of help us either come up with new sort of standards for how we run our classes or new sort of ways that our committee should work for maybe when we're handling issues with that involve diversity and inclusion or even like hiring practices. So I don't know, I would say we were more like young facilitators of like discussions that maybe all our white professors had never had before. And we were kind of expected to push these boundaries and just kind of be like, okay, you guys are people of color. What do you guys think would make this space more welcoming to you? Because Brown is like a predominantly white institution, so a lot of us, or oftentimes, there wouldn't be there were definitely a lot of times where I felt kind of excluded, or I kind of felt like, oh, I didn't
Really?
belong. I kind of felt like, yeah, I mean, like there are definitely. I mean, now it's hard to remember, but I remember when I was there, I was like, damn, I'm like the only Hispanic person in my like 250 like person CS class, like stuff like that. Or like when I was a TA for one of the classes, I was the only like TA of color. And then other times I was the only Hispanic TA, or like, yeah, crazy stuff like that where I was like, damn, that's low-key kind of fucked up that's how it is. But one of the reasons I kind of took on that position was to give myself visibility and kind of for like the younger underclassmen, just kind of give them someone to be like, oh, like Anthony, like he's Hispanic, he's first gen, he's low income, and he's like thriving. He's like the TA of one of like the hardest classes we have here. Like
The stud.
for me, it was more of like a signifier that anyone could, like if I can do it, you can do it. Like if someone like me is doing it, like there's no reason you can't do it. And it was just also make myself visible to talk to like underclassmen, give them life advice on like classes, careers, internship, what's important, what isn't. Sort of how sort of the things we talked about a little bit earlier, just kind of for people who may be the first in their family going to college and they've never actually talked to someone about what is college actually like, or like I've seen it in movies, is it really like that, or like how can I get a job? Like a lot of these things, like there aren't clear cut answers, and like if your family hasn't gone through it, like it's a difficult thing to navigate by yourself, and just you're the only one figuring all these things out as you go. So I was like, how can I be someone's support system, or how can I help distribute information and knowledge to like other people like me, so that people either learn from my mistakes or they just feel like they're not alone on this like journey.
What's it like being a student TA? Do you get paid for that or no?
Yeah, so you either get paid for it or you get credit. I did both. It was definitely like it's not as much work as being in the actual class or like taking a class. So that was like a nice credit to have towards my graduation. And then getting paid, I think you get paid a little over minimum wage. So it's like a cool job. It's like you're putting something on your resume and you're getting paid for it, but it's not like it's not as like extensive as like a job. So it's like maybe like every 3 or 4 days I'm expected to do like 1 or 2 hours of work or something, or maybe I have to hold like office hours and help people. But I'm someone who likes helping people, so I always find that kind of fun. Like that was like an hour of just consistent human interaction of just me taking a break from the library and just helping like students in my class like solve problems or kind of disambiguate things that they thought didn't really understand. Like I don't know, like I was there as both like as a professor, like a peer student, just whatever they needed me, I was there for, and I really like that. I like being a wild card where I go from teaching to one moment to the next moment. We're both working on a problem set together, and I'm kind of guiding them through it, or I'm kind of giving them hints, and like I slowly see their faces light up, and they're like, oh, like the second they put two and two together, and they're just like, wow, you just helped me solve like this riddle or this puzzle. Like you were the gatekeeper that opened up this gate of new information for me or just a new understanding of things. And like stuff like that I always found fulfilling. Or people just always being like, oh my God, Anthony, you were so much like you helped me so much. Like, thank you. Just stuff like that. Like, you know, there'd be right before deadlines, students would come stressed to my office hours and I would just be like, I'll help you, like just helping people as much as I could. And it was like an awesome feeling when people would get their assignments done. And it was like I played a small role in that.
Speaking of help, how do you think that's going to work if, some schools start closing more in the fall? Because again, I'm not sure if you heard, but a couple schools already closed. Notre Dame, UNC, they had in person. Now they're closing to all online. How do you think that's going to work out?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't imagine the planning and everything that goes through it. I mean, for me personally, and I'll speak for colleges, like for high schools, elementary schools, like that's tough. That's like a whole different situation. But for college, to be quite honest, like a lot of my classes, I'd be in like there during lecture, but I don't think I ever was there for a full lecture and was like, oh, I paid attention this whole hour and I know what's going on. I'd have to rewatch like our screen capture. So I'd say in a way, like a lot of the learning I did was online and I'd rewatch like lessons or I'd have to like where I'd pause it and I'd take notes or I'd pause it and I'd be like, okay, did I understand that? So I don't know. And then I'd also just look at the slides like in my free time. Like when I was in a class, I'd just listen to the professor, maybe look at pictures or like slides with maybe general details. But I never really took notes in classes because I didn't find that to be like the way I learned. Like I wasn't someone who was like cramming, just writing as fast as I could for an hour. Like that was not beneficial and nothing ever stuck with me. I was someone who's like, you know what, I'm probably gonna watch this class like 2 more times this week for me to fully understand and just capture everything. So I don't know. So I feel like for some college students, especially if you're used to sort of like the screen captures or like going back to like slides, I don't think it'll be too much of an adjustment. Definitely the only nuance is like if you do rely on TA hours and stuff like that, or you're like in a class where TAs play an integral part of you succeeding and being able to get stuff done, then it's going to be difficult. And we'll see how things go with like Zoom or like Google Hangouts or whatever schools are going to be using. I think it's just going to be trial and error and figuring out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I've never, like, especially during my classes, I've never understood the kids who kind of just sit there and write every single word on the slides, word for word. Like, I'm like, are you even understanding like what you're writing? Because like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you're like speed. You're like trying to be like Lightning McQueen to try to get all the notes down. Like you don't really know
yeah.
what you're writing.
Yeah, I don't like. I tried it the first year I was at Brown, or even the first semester, and after that, I was like, "No, this isn't gonna work. It's just I'm just wasting my time. I'm like cramping up my arm by like how fast I'm writing, and like it's like that. Like you said, like I'd write something, and then I'd be writing for 10 minutes. I'm like, wait, I understood nothing. Like I've recorded nothing in my head of what I've just written down. So I don't know. I was just someone who kind of went to the lectures as like respect for my professors. I would just kind of sit there, try to understand as much as I could and kind of be in the loop as much as I could be. But like honestly, we'd get to half the class and then I'd be like, you know what, I'm lost. Like he lost me and like he's just moving so fast or they're just moving so fast.
I want to switch the topic back to retaining talent because I remember we had an interesting conversation about retaining talent. So I think can we agree that a lot of the top talent in tech pretty much just goes to the top tech companies like let's say FANG, so Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. What do you think banks need to do to attract more top talent, or is it just because the nature of the work they do maybe just isn't as interesting?
Um, from my experience at a big bank and then going to a tech company, I think it's a big part culture and just sort of the way your hiring practices work, your promotion practices work, and just overall stuff like that. Like I feel like at big banks, it tended to be slightly more political than it is at like maybe other tech companies, and that there's definitely like a lot of other aspects you don't think about when it comes to promotion or just like getting paid bonuses and stuff like that. That a lot of the stuff is out of your control, and you just kind of have to figure out how do I navigate things like outside of my work. Like how do I get more visibility? How do I get put on like important projects? And oftentimes, like like depending on the organization structure of your company or stuff, it may be easy for you to like raise a complaint and it get to like someone who could do something about it. But then there's some organizations that just have so much hierarchy and such like a deep organization structure that you'll just be complaining, and you'll never get to the right enough level where someone will listen to you and you'll feel like you've been heard. I also think there's just like big banks kind of bank on like the name, that you can say, oh, I work at this big bank, I work
Yeah.
at JP Morgan, I work at Morgan Stanley. They can say stuff like that. And that's sort of another thing that's supposed to keep you around. And maybe like they're like, you know what, like we won't give you that much money, but like we'll give you good amount of money, and like we'll give you a name that you can associate with yourself. And for a lot of people, that's like another big thing. Like it's like social currency or social value. Like there is some value to being to say, oh, I work here, and
Some
here's some of the things I work about. And like you can be like, oh yeah, I work at the company that like worked on the Apple Card with Apple, like, or I work at the company that's like one of the best like savings account to leave your money if you're just a regular person, like stuff like that. Like people love being able to say that, or people love being able to work on projects where they feel like they're working on something cool and exciting, or something that's like making the press and news. I mean, people have different motivations, people have different things they value, but I definitely feel like big banks kind of rely on you to value the social stuff a lot equally to the monetary stuff. Me, I was someone who was like, I come from like a very modest background. I come from somewhere where like my parents were kind of hoping I'd be someone to be like a breadwinner to kind of help gravitate their stresses about what they're going to do when they retire, or what they're going to do about after they can't work anymore. So with me, I always kind of valued the compensation or the value like the company I worked for put on me, or like what they thought I was worth. So that was always a big thing for me. And I definitely noticed that tech companies tend to have a higher value. They tend to have like higher respect for you as an individual. I feel like at the company I work for now, like I'm definitely micromanaged a lot less than I was. And there's definitely a lot more respect and trust in my independence than there was at the company I was at before. And the whole culture of just like, I don't know, like it feels like my new company just cares about me a lot more than my old company does, where like I get free food, I get all these like commuter benefits, I get this like free health insurance. Like my other company made me pay for my health insurance, but this company gives me free health insurance. Then they give you all these other stuff that like if you die working for the company, like not at work, but if you die at some point while you're working for the company, they'll give your kids up until they're 18 like a set amount of money every month as like a benefit that you were working for the company when you passed away. And like I don't know, like it was like a nice thing to know that it's like, oh, if I die working for this company, like they're gonna like make sure my kids are taken care of, like my family's taken care of and stuff like that. Like I don't know, just like understanding, hearing that things, you're like, wow, like that's amazing that a company would do that. I don't know, I just started feeling very valued, and it kind of reached this thing for me where I was like, damn, like I would love to work for a company that values me that much, or they see that my worth, or that me as an employee is this like important to them.
So it seems like I think the things that maybe the banks need to work on is that they're too focused on why. So they're basically trying to market like why we're a good firm to work for, whereas like tech companies are sort of like why we're a good firm to work for, but also why you'd be a good fit here and how we can benefit you. Like they fill in all like the more boxes per se, I guess.
Yeah, I would say the big banks definitely don't make it about you, or your value to them isn't really one of the things that keeps you around. It's more so their value to you is the thing. But yeah, and I guess the organizational thing about banks is like banks are incentivized to keep costs low. Like they're a bank, like they're monetary, like they're these people who are like efficient with their money. So they're also like, I don't know, maybe you're working on a cool, exciting project, but it's costing too much money, or it's like going over budget or whatever. They're not the types to be like, oh, we've already invested so much, let's finish it. They'll be like, okay, like this is it, we're done working on this, like we're gonna work on something else. And then sometimes you're like, okay, well, what am I going to work on now? Like, you hired me to work on this. What are you going to have me work on now? So, like, I've definitely noticed that situation happening a lot more at like big financial institutions,
I,
which can
I
kind of be like,
I'm
it
sorry.
can it can kind of be like a little like depressing and like, I don't know, kill your motivation where you're like, dude, I spent like 2 3 months on this, like just working, putting hours into this, just putting my best into it because I knew when it came time for like promotions or bonuses, this would be like a reflection of what I did and like the value I added. And for you to just eliminate that like on a whim because like we went over budget due to poor whatever time management, poor people management, whatever the cause was, it's just like it tends to like kill your motivation and just your whole like outlook on like yeah,
Yeah.
or your confidence in the organization.
Now you brought up an interesting point because you talked about micromanaged, and I was just curious if you think maybe banks are a little bit more structured than what they need to be, maybe like relative to like other firms.
Yeah, like I said, I think it goes back to like when I was talking about the contrast between like the actual business side people and the engineers. There's definitely this whole culture of just like you being productive the whole time you're there, and that's not how people work. Like we're not productive. Like we're gonna have times we're lazy, we're gonna have time we're very productive, we're gonna have times we procrastinate. Like I don't know, there's just this unrealistic expectation that you're just gonna be this machine that's just gonna be producing work 24/7 or when like it's demanded. So I definitely feel like there was this expectation from a lot of my managers early on that I was just gonna be at my desk, and if I wasn't at my desk I had a good reason, like I was in the hospital or something, or like I just wasn't feeling well, that I don't know. Like I always like I feel like there's one thing at my old company. I'd feel really bad if I my coffee break was like 5 minutes over, 10 minutes over, because then my manager would be like, "Where were you? What were you doing? Like why were you out of your seat for so long?" Just this whole lack of like trust, or this whole lack that I was getting stuff done, or like that I was moving at a different speed. I don't know. It was just something that I didn't really like, and it kind of always rubbed me the wrong way. That I was expected to just be on my seat, being productive, and I feel like there was no respect for like someone's humanity or just that they're a person, and that people can't be expected to just be like working like a machine all the time.
You think maybe it has to do with maybe a lack of perspective too? Maybe like kind of because eventually they were at the position that we're at now, or not we're at, but like maybe some of the
Yeah,
analysts are. Maybe they kind of
yeah,
lost that kind of perspective.
yeah, definitely perspective. Definitely also, like I said, culture. Just people are like, this is how it's always been. Like this is how you're gonna go through it. Like this is how it was for me, so this is how it's gonna be for you. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing those companies can do is just hire better, or not better, but managers from like these companies that do really well or do a great job like keeping retaining employees, and asking these managers, okay, what made your old company be so good at retaining people, or how did you guys keep everyone so happy or so content that they were able to put up with whatever the conditions were, the projects were. And I feel like they also like they lack the diversity of thought of like what other people are doing. They're kind of like, we've been doing it this way. We've been around for 200 years, so we're just going to keep doing it this way because this is how it's worked. That they're never like, they never stop to rethink the way tech companies are like, oh, how can we make this better? Like, what are our competitors doing that we should be doing as well? Like, I feel like tech companies are just so easy to adapt, so easy to just pivot. Like, you hear that word pivot a lot. And I feel that also comes down to the people treatment or the way they manage people, that it's also very similar, just something they're always adapting to.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think as a whole, I personally believe that tech companies definitely are better at more like the relationship aspect of things, especially with their customers. They're really devoted, or they really understand customer needs and how to best serve them. And I think financial institutions are better at generating money and cutting and keeping costs low. So having
Right.
nice and fat margins, if you want to, which I find pretty interesting. But I just want to get your thoughts because we were talking about tech companies. What do you think about Microsoft? Do you think they're going to buy TikTok in time or Oracle in time or no?
Um, we'll see. I personally use TikTok a lot, so we'll
Oh, you
see.
do?
I think it's a really good app. I think the algorithm they built, or just the ability for you to find new and entertaining things, is like crazy good. Like I can't think of anything similar where I'm just always finding either new content creators or just new different types of maybe jokes or memes on such a rapid, like every time I scroll up I feel like I'm finding something funny or something interested to me. And even the way they kind of pitch their ads, or the way they sell their ads, I see a lot more like things where I'm like, oh, like I'm hungry, and then I'll see Uber Eats ad or like a Grubhub ad, or like, you know what, like I'm looking at like street fashion, like TikTok videos of people's street fashion, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, I could use some new jeans, and then I see an ad for like jeans or something, and it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy. Even from the ads, like the ads don't feel like ads, it just feels like, oh, like okay, bookmark that may be something useful. But I don't know, TikTok is just so easy to use, easy for you to create stuff. Like their whole system of you creating your own videos, they have so many different effects. the UI is very like intuitive. Like it's not that difficult. I mean, when you first use it, yeah, there's like a lot there, so you're gonna struggle. But like after you do it, like it's not that hard to have a quick workflow of just producing content. And I feel like it's the one of the social medias, like compared to like maybe YouTube and Instagram, with the lowest barrier of entry for you to start just producing content on a rapid schedule, rapid pace, and just have it be pretty like seemingly like pretty like high quality.
Speaking of algorithms, I find that point interesting because I'm not sure how often you use YouTube. When they make recommendations, it's usually from like the same like fixed amount of like what do you call it, YouTube creators. So it's like the same like 5 or 6 people, but just different videos.
Right. Yeah, I mean YouTube is good in its own way, but I would say that it's kind of kept me in this bubble of using the same creators, while TikTok is like kind of like in a way like a social graph where it's like you're here. How about these videos over here? Oh, you don't like those? Let's put you in these group of videos over here. And it's just, they're always changing, always adjusting, and just kind of making my exposure to a lot of different things like very wide. But at the same time, I'll see like the creators I really like, or I'll see the ones that I spend a lot more time viewing. Like I'll see them show up a lot more. But I definitely like the way they curate everything.
Do you so did you hear about Instagram coming out with their own little TikTok reels?
Yeah, so I think they released it a couple weeks ago. I wish they would have released it in their own application. I wish it wasn't a part of Instagram. It already feels like there's a lot to Instagram, like when they release the stories and everything. And I wasn't truly convinced that Reels could live in Instagram. Like I thought Reels should have been its own thing, and then I think the publicity and everything would have been a lot better if that was the case. Because one, it's like a lot of people didn't know it was there. Like I had to explain to my friends where it was. Like a lot of my friends had no idea it was there. Because I made a reels and I was, do you guys see it? And they're like, what are you talking about? So I had to like show them where it was. I had to show them how you see it on someone's profile. And it was just so non-intuitive, and it was just like so many barriers to get you on it that I don't think they noted. Like normally Facebook releases really good products like Messenger, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. Like they have all of these like amazing products, but I think with Reels they really missed a good opportunity, and just like an opportunity with all the embargoes and everything, and President Trump being like, you guys can't use TikTok. Like it's Chinese government. Like it's like it has something to do with like Chinese servers. Like we can't trust where your data is going and everything. And it's like, that would have been the perfect time for Instagram to be like the leader in like mini videos, mini video content. Like I don't know. I feel like they really missed the mark.
Yeah, and so interesting you say that because I remember my friend the other day tried to send me like a DM of a reel, and I was like, wait a second, it's not. It's like I thought you had to go in like the app store to download it, but he sent to me on Instagram. I was like, wait a second, this is like just like another post. It's like one of those like those long videos they have. What's it called Instagram TV? It's just like a shorter like it's like a clip of like a Instagram TV.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what it is. So it's kind of like, well, it's not really like TikTok because I don't have a TikTok, to be clear. All my friends have it. They send me TikToks, but I just don't have it. I think I would just be addicted to it.
I don't know if you should get it. You'll spend a lot of time on it. You're gonna waste time on it.
And the reason why I know that is because I'm sure you know, Vine. I was on that constantly. I'm talking probably like 7-8 hours a day, which wasn't pretty good. And so I was like, you know what, TikTok, I probably shouldn't get it, honestly.
I was a big Vine guy back in the day.
So let's give Instagram or Facebook the benefit of the doubt. Let's say it does take off and they get a bunch of I guess it kind of takes off and they kind of gain market share in that space. What do you think that's going to hurt them and like the antitrust kind of investigations are going through?
I don't know. I haven't been reading up too much on it just because, or I haven't been following it that much just because, I don't know. I'm someone who like, I see the value in everything, or I kind of like how like, let me take Amazon for example, that I can just find everything on Amazon and that it's cheap and everything I want is there. Or like with Facebook that like I can just communicate with everyone, and that I don't know, like I just see so many good things in the way things run now, and it makes our life so convenient and so easy that I'm like, oh, but they do all this, and they're like, if we were to break them apart, yeah, we make everything more competitive and we create a better landscape. But I feel like we're losing a lot of like we're losing a lot of the non-friction we have in these applications and sort of the way things are running. And then I also work for one of the companies that's like in question right now. So
yeah, exactly. Did you see the testimony Um,
I saw bits and pieces of it. I think they had technical issues when I tried to watch it. Like I think Jeff
did they?
Bezos, for some reason, yeah, the richest man in the world had poor internet or something.
Imagine that worth over like what is he still worth over 100 billion or is he under now because of the whole divorce
All I
thing?
know Amazon just keeps going up and up and up. So
Yeah, exactly. I think they're what 3,300 a share. That's crazy money.
crazy.
Did you see some of Zuckerberg's testimony? Imagine that, just spending 5 minutes talking about barbecue brisket.
I didn't see that. No, I didn't see. I didn't see some of. I would say I saw some bits and pieces, but I didn't see that clip.
Yeah, no, he just goes on and they're like 5 minutes to Mr. Zuckerberg, and he goes, "Hey, how's it going? I'm live from my backyard cooking some barbecue beef brisket." He just went on for 5 minutes. I was like, imagine that, like the CEO of Facebook, and you're talking about barbecue brisket at your testimony in front of Congress. He's living the life, honestly. But what's it called? Yeah, Anthony, let's end on a good note here, huh?
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.